What's going on, everybody? Zedd here, bringing you my first of many, hopefully, Marvel's Midnight Suns videos. Most of you probably don't know me in the Marvel's Midnight Suns community, but I'm a fighting game player traditionally. I also play strategy games. Those are pretty much the only genres I play. And I make content for Soul Calibur 6 or other fighting games that I'm interested in. I love tier lists, I love discussion, and I like to play things at a high level or take things pretty seriously, competitively, whatever. So that's a little bit, it doesn't really matter, but that's who I am. So I take things seriously. Midnight Suns, I fully intend to go pretty hard and make content on educational playthroughs, challenge modes, whatever, stream it. Pretty much whatever I feel like. And this is sort of the first step in that. I also intend to play on the highest difficulty available. I know that Midnight Suns has a lot of difficulty levels, which I find that very exciting. So we'll definitely be doing that. I have played XCOM tons. I played a lot of roguelike card games. I love card games in general. My favorite one, you may not have heard of it, it's called Tainted Grail. I highly recommend you check it out on Steam if you've never played it. It's my favorite, just thematically, the sound, the game, whatever. Anyway, shameless plug. So, Marvel's Midnight Suns tier list. How does this work? The game's not even out yet. Well, I sort of had this idea to do this video because I love generating discussion. Now, the hope is that people see this video, maybe gets you thinking about team composition, or maybe you want to just prove me wrong, and so you're more interested to make somebody work who's maybe lower on this list than you may have hoped, or whatever. Cool, let me know. My hope is to make it now. It is currently October 9th, and December 2nd, the game is slated to come out, excuse me. And I want to look back after my first playthrough and see how right I was, how wrong I was, and then when I'm going through my second, third, and fourth playthroughs, maybe make updated versions of this just for fun. This is something that we do in the fighting game community a lot, is tier lists, and it's not something I really see other genres do. So I kind of want to bring that over. Maybe something a bit fresh, a bit new in terms of content, because the strategy games you guys have always seen the let's play. But, you know, that's great, but, you know, where's the discussion? You know, how do you know that the good Midnight Sun players, what makes them good, right? So anyway, enough on that. Let's talk about the list and how it's broken up. Let me show you the whole roster real quick. There we go. So we have Blade, Captain America, Captain Marvel. That is regular Hunter, light Hunter, then dark Hunter, because you can choose different branches. Doctor Strange, Ghost Rider, Iron Man, Magik, Nico, Wanda, aka Scarlet Witch, Spider-Man, and Wolverine. These are all the confirmed characters in the game as of right now. Yes, I know there's murmurs about Hulk being a playable character. Yes, we've kind of sort of seen him, maybe kind of not really. But because we don't know anything about Hulk, I mean, let's be honest, he's going to be a tank of some kind. But we don't know what he does, so we can't really speculate. I have scoured the edges of the earth and the bottom bellows of the internet for everything on Midnight Suns. I have never played it myself, though I have watched the content. I don't know. I've rewatched the Venom fight at least a dozen times with different content creators. So look at different teams, different interactions. Now, unfortunately, the Venom fight has always been done on sort of an easier difficulty. I get it. It was a timed event. It was a 5-hour event. But you can still pull some useful information from there. So going through this video, I'm going to talk about some concepts that are in the game, concepts characters have, and there will be some assumptions to be made. For example, just with no context, I have to assume that environmental attacks will not always be equally as effective, right? Or I have to assume that there will be enemies with the ability to either bypass block or weaken you, right? Lower damage output. Or even I have to assume that I believe this is correct, but I might be wrong, that bosses cannot be shot into drops, which are the insta-kill pits of death. I'm pretty sure that I've seen on the tooltips on the side during a Venom fight where it says like supervillain, and I believe one of the things is it cannot be put into drops. So there are some assumptions to be made, all right? So the intro is a bit long, I know. So let's move on to the breakdown. Consistent means the character is consistently good. Doesn't really need much explanation. You can take them in your team no matter what, and you're probably going to be happy with it. That said, I think a traditional team will have a tank, a support, and a DPS. Obviously, that is not a hard rule. If you've got someone like, say, um, I know that Scarlet Witch, she has some pseudo support capabilities as a DPS, or even Magik, right? Sort of supportish, but she also has a lot of CC or damage as well. So there will be characters who flex these roles, and then it entirely depends on how you build the hunter too, because you have to bring the hunter in many missions. So you're gonna have to sort of. I would suggest building a team with 2 heroes, and then just assuming you bring the hunter. Um, that said, there will be opportunities to bring 3 heroes that are not the hunter. And of course, that's when you'll have the opportunity to kind of mess around and play a bit more. Situationally strong means they're really strong characters, but maybe they have an inherent weakness or something, again, based on assumptions, that will make them not 100% the pick. Niche means the characters either are just lacking in many ways, or they take a lot of work to make work, or you have to build the team composition entirely around them. And then weaker power creep, this means that the character either just kind of sucks, or in the case of power creep, another character does that character's job better, aka that character doesn't fulfill their role sufficiently enough to take a spot in my 3-man team, because you have to consider, again, if we assume hardest difficulty play and we assume that there are exceptions and there are ways that the enemies have around your stuff, and like there are many assumptions, we have to assume that there you can't just make any character work if you want to play Midnight Suns at the highest level. That's what I'm implying. Now, that said, if a challenge one day is, if someone's like, Zedd, do a playthrough where you maximize the character that you have lowest on your tier list, I'll be like, yeah, absolutely, let's do it. This is just for discussion, right? Don't And I've never played the game, so I might be wrong. So anywho, let's get into it. I've broken it up into categories. So the hunter will be first, because the hunter is our main character. Whatever tier those 3 hunters fall in on, she'll just be first. But after that, it just becomes tank, support, DPS. Okay, so just so we're on the same page about how I've structured it, it's not ordered necessarily, it's just broken up by role. And I'll give my thoughts on each character as we go along. So with the lengthy intro out of the way, let's get started here. So first up is, of course, regular hunter. I mean, really, there's not much to say here other than I hope that the hunter is a good character. Because if we're stuck taking this character all the time, I really hope that base hunter or mixed tree hunter is at least fun, is good. Based on what we've seen, I think so, but I just hope it's good enough. Now I'm also hoping that on say New Game Plus. Now this is just a hope. I don't know if this is true. I hope that there's an option to just not bring the hunter, like remove the requirement and only bring her in for cinematic purposes. Because I think it would be kind of a shame and a disservice to be unable to take 3 non-hunter heroes throughout the entire playthrough, but that's neither here nor there. That's just me hoping. It is what it is. Not much to say about this one. Let's move on. So, and that she'd be like an all-rounder, right? Because you could do whatever you want with the hunter. So first up for tank category, we have Captain America. Now, in terms of what I was saying earlier, if there's a way to bypass block, if there's a way to bypass block, then Cap will fall to situationally strong. However, because of how integral block is into a lot of the kits, particularly Captain Marvel, who we'll get to, I think it would be a bit strange to just bypass block, though I think it will, like, if it's the odd attack, or maybe an attack removes block rather than bypasses block, right? So if you take a hit from that character, it removes all your block, or maybe double block damage. I think that's a little more reasonable than just straight up like cutting through block. Now, the other things that make Captain America strong as a tank is not only is he beefy and he just spawns with block, but he has taunt on so many cards. AoE taunt, he has a ranged taunt. That's a bit different than, say, Wolverine, who we'll get to. So the fact he has a ranged taunt means he doesn't have to be in the right position to actually take aggro if necessary. He also has a couple knockbacks and forceful knockback cards, which means he brings CC. This is also something that Wolverine doesn't really do. I'm just making comparisons because they're both tanks. Um, Cap is very much your traditional tank and spank kind of character. He does exactly what you think he does. Like knockback CC, block taunt. His damage output doesn't seem particularly high, but he does have some ability to like he doesn't really spend heroism that much either, so he's pretty good in that respect. Um, Meaning that your heroism can be saved for other more impactful heroic cards or your DPS. So yeah, I just think he's probably going to be a really solid pick. Now, obviously, for the record, you would probably just play who you like. This is a single player Marvel game after all. Um, but I think as a tank, I think he's going to really shine, like him or not. That's pretty much all I have to say on him. Next up is Wolverine. So I alluded to it a little bit before. I think he'll also be consistently strong, but for different reasons. So while Cap has a lot of block and taunt and peel, just general peel, that term, for those who maybe don't know, means you are crowd controlling an enemy off of your teammate so they don't get hit, they don't die, whatever. Um, Wolverine instead brings a bit more of a bruiser uh, side of the coin. He's sort of like I'm going to refer to him as sort of a drain tank, in that he does damage and he tanks by dealing damage. He wants to stay in the fray. He has a lot of chain attacks, meaning he can rack up hits pretty quickly. He can also minions in this game die in one hit traditionally, so he can just sort of clean up a lot of individual characters. He also uniquely has a card that resurrects him, so you only get one resurrect in Midnight Suns combat. Now, that also might not be true at higher difficulties, and if that's the case, where you get to a difficulty where there are no resurrection combat, Wolverine shoots up the tank tier list because I have to assume that there will be situations where you sort of have to you take a tactical death in order to finish the mission. That now again that may not be true. I'm just assuming. Now because there's no permadeath in this game, that's fine. And you go to the Abbey and they have to recover for a few days. That's fine. So because he has the ability to revive himself and heal himself and cleanse himself of all CC, which is huge, like that's a big part as well. He can just keep going and tanking and going and tanking, and then he has a massive AoE taunt, which is not ranged, granted, but it is still a taunt, and he actually brings some damage. So this is a character who will fulfill that tank role for your team while also bringing a ton of melee DPS. Now, if this is the thing. If there's a fight where, say, healing is reduced, or maybe there's like I don't know, a boss fight where healing is reduced by 50%, then he maybe isn't that strong in that particular fight. Um, but we don't know if that's a thing, or at least I don't know if that's a thing. So I'm just gonna put him up here. I think both these characters are pretty strong, which is good because if you need a sort of bruiser or beefcake in your team, it feels good when they're good. Uh, it sucks to have crappy tanks because, man, I don't know, it just sucks. Like imagine if you had a tank in XCOM, which there might be in the mods. I play unmodded versions, and if your ranger could be a tank all of a sudden, you know how useful that would be. So I think both these characters will be really strong in their respective roles of tank and tank/bruiser. Next up, we have... Oh, and this is the first of our support category, Doctor Strange. So I think this character is broken. um, I don't even think it's a debate. I think he is a must-have in every team. Unless I'm missing something, I think he's insane. So he can generate heroism just passively. He doesn't really need heroism much. He has redraws, draws, healing, damage buff. He has decent damage himself, but the ability to buff all the cards in your hand by X number of damage, I believe it's 5 or 6 base, means that you can take someone like, say, I don't know, Blade or Spider-Man or Iron Man, someone who wants to play multiple cards of their own in a turn. Iron Man's probably the best example. And all of a sudden, every attack that Iron Man's doing is just buffed to heck. And while Doctor Strange himself, you know, is no slouch in the damage department. Now, it is worth mentioning, if Midnight Suns is the kind of game where all you need is a tank and 2 DPS, maybe he's not that useful, right? If this ends up being a game where it's like literally just bring your hunter, um, I don't know, like go Dark Hunter, Iron Man, and Scarlet Witch, or I don't know, Light Hunter, uh, Iron Man, and Spider Man. Like if that ends up becoming the meta, is just damage, then okay, maybe he won't be that strong. But I am going under the assumption that at higher difficulties, you won't be able to just brawl your way through. But I do think at lower difficulties, I think Doctor Strange will feel like a garbage character. Not garbage, but unnecessary. I think you'll be able to just go right through it, and you don't even need him. So I'm hoping I'm right. I'm hoping that support is necessary because if the game really is just tank and spank, that's going to remove a lot of strategic depth from the game. So I am hoping that support is necessary. So anyway, let's come back. I think Doctor Strange is really strong. The Blessing of Ashanti buffing all cards in your hand is massive, and just generating passive heroism is huge because if you don't know, heroism is sort of your bread and butter. It's your ultimate gauge in Midnight Suns, and you can generate it by getting kills and using cards, but the ability to actually generate more of it is massive, and so I think that will be very valuable. Um, yeah, so I think he'll be really strong. I don't even know if it's a debate. Although his damage output will be lacking for sure, and he doesn't seem to have any knockbacks or CCs that we know of, so he's not perfect, but that's not his role. Next up, Magik. So Magik, kind of a cool character for sure. She opens portals, she shoots people through them, and she sort of has automatic, what's the word? Automatic environmental attacks behind already damaging abilities. However, what makes her sort of special in my opinion is the fact that she not only does she have hard CC in the force or in the form of forceful knockback, but she also herself can banish a target, which then opens a death hole, aka why am I forgetting what they're called? Well, they're circle pits that open up. I'm calling them death holes. There's a name for them. It has escaped me. I'm sorry. And essentially, if you forceful knockback someone into the pit, there's a percentage chance that they instantly die. Now, while I said earlier in the video that minions are insta-killed, I'm pretty sure that like higher tier mobs that aren't bosses are not one-hit KO. So putting them into these death pits could be really useful. However, it's not a guaranteed chance, so make of that what you will. But the fact that she is self-synergetic, right, knockbacks her own death pits, she does have other forms of support as well. She has the ability to clump enemies together for AoE attacks, which is nice. And it's also cool in that they will end in the same, in sort of the same formation no matter what. So if you use her ability where she picks up enemies in an AoE and then plops them all down, you've seen this before in her gameplay, they will always be equidistant and sort of spaced out nicely, which means that you can, you know, let's just use Wolverine as an example. You can just run him into the middle of them and then taunt them all at once, right? So it's not so much that her damage output will be high. I don't think it will, to be honest. What I think is important is that she will enable your team to do the things they want to do. So while Doctor Strange, gives you more cards and redraws and more card control, this is very much my play style. I think, and Magik not so much, but I do see the value. I think that she will set up your team in terms of positioning, and I think she'll be able to fix players' mistakes. That's what I think, anyway. And what I mean by that is, with how positioning works in Midnight Suns, you can only move one character indefinitely for that turn, but that's it. Meaning that if you wanted to move your whole team manually, it would take you 3 turns, which means 3 turns of enemies hitting you. Now, the attacks in Midnight Suns do reposition your team automatically. This is a huge part of the game and something that should not be overshadowed. And so Magik will help deal with that. She will help you sort of circumvent those issues and, oh crap, my you know, my hunter isn't where I thought she would be after her slash. Oh no, what do I do? I've already used my move. Oh, well, Magik's got you, because she'll either knock the enemy away, right, through a portal and out another one, or she'll clump up a bunch of enemies and be like, all right, yeah, let's not attack my hunter. Thanks, Chief. Um, so she'll have that sort of positioning utility and that dynamic ability. Plus, uniquely, she will do good damage via the environment. That is worth mentioning. So while I don't think her cards will have inherently high damage values, the fact that she can just go boom and send you through a portal into a generator or into a piece of rock or whatever the environment attacks are throughout the whole game, I think that's valuable. But more importantly, her control over your team's position and your enemy's position is huge. And whereas Doctor Strange will instead a lot of hand control, right, card control, and I think that's a lot of fun if you're confident in your positioning. If you're not confident in your positioning and you're running a more simplistic play this card, do this attack, play this card, do this attack. If that's your style, I think Magik might be a stronger character for you. But if you play more my style, where it's like hand control, card control, strategy, but you don't really need to worry about your positioning, I think Doctor Strange might have the edge. So keep that in mind. I wouldn't run them both together necessarily, because I think you'd be missing out on a lot of DPS there. Now again, if that's not true, and every character does damage, then these characters are broken, and every other character just kind of sucks. Um, so I'm making assumptions. Choose one, not both. That's all I'm saying. Again, we're assuming highest difficulty. We're making assumptions here, but if you're just playing casually on normal difficulty to have some fun, run them both. I think they're both super slick. All right, and next up, Iron Man. So those are two tanks, two supports, and this is the only DPS I have in the consistent tier. Now, I had to think about this one because originally when I was building a list, I didn't have any DPS in the consistent tier, and I thought, well, that doesn't really make any sense. Now, does it? Why am I putting the DPS on situationally or niche? Well, it it's because I came come to realize that the DPS, they didn't have as many tools and they didn't have as many options as the tanks or the supports. But I realized, well, that's by design. No kidding, because if they did, they'd be broken. So I sort of reassessed my DPS characters with a new lens, and Iron Man took the top spot by a large margin, and I'll explain why. So, looking at his cards again and the way the game is played, he can generate draws, redraws, heroism, which is already more utility than some of these characters have, which we'll get to, while doing absurd, sorry, I'm yawning as we go, absurd amounts of damage. Like, he can do damage in a line with his beam, obviously, his laser beam, I don't know, his chest laser, whatever it's called. He has tons of AoE damage via, what is it called? I think the move is called Air Superiority, I think, where he flies up in the air and he shoots a bunch of his missiles out of his shoulders and his back. So that's super tight for AoE. He has other AoE, he has explosions, like, it's Iron Man, you know what he does, right? He has lasers, flamethrowers, rockets, beams, missiles, whatever. He's got it all, right? He has a little bit of CC as well. He does have knockback. He also has quick cards. And so, yeah, I think that he just does a lot for a DPS while also having absurd damage. Like, one of the things that you want to understand about Iron Man is he does so much damage, it's absurd. There's a catch. A lot of his cards will eventually get mods, if they don't have them already, to where they get buffed if they get redrawn, or Iron Man gets buffs if you play more than one Iron Man card in a turn. So he is going to take some of your card plays. So running him with characters who can either have free actions or characters who can refund card plays, there are a few, right? Doctor Strange has some, Spider-Man has some, will be very important. But that doesn't make him situationally strong. I do think that if you were to run, I'll just give you an example. If you ran like Captain America, Doctor Strange, and Iron Man, if you had Captain America sort of in aggro way, taunting when necessary, Doctor Strange using something like Blessing of Vishanti and generating heroism, and then you spent your two of your three card plays on Iron Man cards, and you taunted when necessary, and you generated heroism when necessary, or you only ran Doctor Strange for Blessing of Ashanti, literally, um, Iron Man could literally 1v9, right? Or whatever the equivalent is in this game. I think he could take on the entire game. I think he'll be super overtuned. If I'm wrong, that's fine, but his whole shtick is playing multiple Iron Man cards slash redrawing them. And so if you can get good at, again, remember we talked about card management, deck management. If you're good with that kind of stuff, I think Iron Man's a great pick for you. But if you want to sort of turn off the deck building and the hand control and focus more on the attack decisions and the positioning, Iron Man may not be for you. But he is also, and this was another big issue, or not issue, but concept. He is also a ranged DPS, almost exclusively. Why is that important, Zed? Well, if we use the Venom fight as any indicator of what the game is going to be like, we already know that when you're fighting Venom, he has symbiote skin. Oh, spoilers, sorry. I feel like if you clicked on this, you're as into the game as I am. Where every melee attack, or sorry, every time he's attacked, I believe, he has a 50% chance to bind or ensnare the next melee attack, or melee, however you pronounce it, whatever. Meaning that if you were to say, let's just say you attacked him with Spider-Man, because Spider-Man's in that fight, and he gets symbiote skin activated, you wouldn't want to melee him again, otherwise your character would be bound by a Venom version of Thwip, which means you can't use that character until you attack the symbiote's snare. So you're wasting effort, you're wasting time, or you have to maneuver yourself. But if you attack with a ranged character, the symbiote skin goes away. Like, it only lasts that one turn. So, even if you can't run Iron Man in that fight, so I don't think anyone has yet, what that implies is there will be fights where you want more melee focused teams or you want more ranged focused teams. There is a plethora of melee characters in this game. Almost like it's absurd how many melee characters are in Midnight Suns compared to ranged. And so genuinely, this factor alone puts him quite high above the other DPSs for me. Um, yeah, so anywho, that's my thoughts on Iron Man. I think he'll be really strong, and he can be a solo carry for your team if you like him. I do. I like Iron Man. I will definitely be doing like an Iron Man glass cannon run where it's like Iron Man and two supports or Iron Man and two tanks, and he's my only DPS, and he's the only DPS I ever take. That's the plan on one of the runs. Um, the first run I go through is going to be a bit more spread out and well-rounded, but yeah. Anywho, moving on. Oh, that's it for consistent. So yeah, situationally strong. Let's go light hunter. So it's hard to say with the hunter because the hunter, I think the hunter is just going to be a really strong character in general. So please take my hunter placements with a grain of salt because not only do we know nothing about the hunter in the grand scheme of the hunter, but I think depending on how you play the hunter is going to change how you play the game and it's going to change how you build your teams. So I'm going to do my best to justify why the hunter placements are where they are. But I think that this will be the one where you could just say, no, Zed, screw you, you're wrong. More than anything else on this list. So Light Hunter. Light Hunter, what makes it Light Hunter different from Dark Hunter is, oh, and for the record, I'm assuming that you go full light or full dark or mixed. I'm just making that assumption because it'd be far too difficult to place the hunter otherwise. Otherwise, we just say, screw it, I'm not even going to put the hunter on the tier list, but I think that that's disingenuous. So anyway, Light Hunter. Light Hunter has not a lot. It has healing abilities, cleansing abilities, heroism generation, and those are its three big key factors. We had already established that heroism generation is huge. It's like huge. So, because as of right now, I don't think there's a character that benefits from sitting on high heroism. And I think that that would actually be a bad card, or a bad character. Because the whole game's cast revolves around spending it and generating it. If there was one character who wanted you to save it, I don't think that'd be a very good character. Um, anyway, healing, cleansing, and heroism generation. and can spawn Charlie the dog. Make of that what you will. Now, I'm going to go out on a whim and say that Charlie is going to be a meme. I I think Charlie is going to be bad. I know. I know. You dog lovers out there, you're already Charlie's going to be great. No. I don't think so. I don't think so. So, if we never cast Charlie and we save that heroism and we spend it on cleanse and heroism generation, and you run Light Hunter as just full support. So I think you'd be able to run Light Hunter with Wolverine as your tank, and then any DPS, and your money. Like you wouldn't want to run Doctor Strange with Light Hunter, I don't think. Um, I don't think that would be very efficient in terms of cards. But um, yeah, I get it's hard, right? Because the hunter has so many things. I believe the number was thrown around. She's got like 40 cards to choose from, which is a lot compared to the rest of the cast. So it's hard, right? I think I'll miss the mark on hunter the most. But I think a light hunter is situationally strong. I don't think the support of healing is going to be that necessary, because if we think about, I know the game's not XCOM, but I have to draw some comparisons. If you think about XCOM, healing sucks. Now, for those of you who maybe are like, what? I'm a specialist one trick. Well, you're weird. When you build a specialist at like legendary difficulty in XCOM, you don't build it for the healing. You build it for the hacking and the, what's it called? Not Overwatch, but like sending the drone for defensive bonuses. That's why you run a specialist. And even then, a lot of times you don't even run one. You only run one in the late game, again, for the robot damage. And even then, you don't need it. So healing becomes less and less and less important in all strategy games, actually, that I've played, the better you get. So I am worried that eventually the Light Hunter is just going to feel like, why would I bother when I'm not getting hit, forehead? I just don't get hit. um, but I think for most players and most playthroughs, it'll be a fun playstyle. And if you like Doggo, run it. But either the dog is going to be here's the problem. Okay. Here's the problem with Charlie, right? As a minion based, I think it's a heroism card where you cast it, summons Charlie, and Charlie does have other abilities and cards that get added to your hand. I don't know if they cost a card play. I don't think so. I hope not. But the problem with adding a character like Charlie, adding a fourth man to the roster, so to speak, is either Charlie's going to be too insignificant to be worth the card play in the first place, or too strong that you always want to run Light Hunter. And it's going to be this weird problem. And I am faithful that they're not going to make Charlie so overtuned that is like, why am I not running Doggo, right? So that, for that reason, I don't think that Light Hunter is going to be as consistent. But in a world where, or if there's a stage in the game or a mission where cleansing is a big deal, I think it's really strong, because from what we know, very few like cleanses exist in the game. And so if Light Hunter has access to one of the only, that alone is worth running a Light Hunter. Truly. And the fact that you can sort of crossbreed light and dark trees, it might be worth it to go into light enough to get the cleanse and then go into dark, or vice versa, right? Go into dark enough to get a little bit of damage and then go straight light. Again, we don't really know how that works. So yeah, anywho, the hunters are hard to talk about, but that's my take. I think the healing is going to be I think Charlie's going to be either worthless or OP, and I'm leaning more towards worthless. And I think that healing might not be necessary, but I think the cleanse and heroism generation, those two factors alone, huge. But I wouldn't run Doctor Strange if you're gonna do that. Just yeah. Um, Next up we have Spider-Man. Does whatever a spider can. So Spider-Man, I think this character's design is sick. Like, for the record, like let's just get that out of the way. I think that him revolving around environmental attacks is super cool. And in case you don't know, his cards and his passive and all that, they either give percentage chance or guaranteed chance to make environmental attacks cost 0 heroism or refund the heroism spent, which is a big deal. However, and I think he's really strong. He has hard CC in the form of Thwip, which is really strong because it acts as effectively a one-turn stun. I think it's one turn. Don't quote me. It might be two. And so far, not a lot of DPS characters have hard CC like that. Not a lot. We'll get there. um, but, there's a catch. I am assuming that number one, environmental attacks will not be equal in power, right? I apologize. I was up so early this morning. Um, Environmental attacks will not be equal in strength, meaning that if I was to kick an opponent into a helicopter or a portal, or not a portal, helicopter or a generator or a side of a building, are they really going to have the same damage values? I hope not. And if they do, that's a bit strange. So I'm not 100% sure on that. However, more importantly, I think that Magik as a support using the environment sort of negates the necessity for Spider-Man. At the same time, if you run Doctor Strange with Spider-Man, I think that's a bit weird too, because if Spider-Man's whole thing is environmental attacks or attacks that affect the environment, you don't really need the Blessing of Vishanti. Also, the fact that environmental attacks might cost you a bunch of heroism. You might think that Doctor Strange should be a good pairing because he generates heroism, right? But no, because Spider-Man can either have it cost 0 or refund it. So you don't need the generation if you're running Spider-Man, right? So I think that if you want to run a composition that runs Spider-Man as sort of like a pseudo DPS, and then run like you could run Iron Man, Spider-Man, Hunter, and then have your Hunter be light, or you can run Iron Man, Spider-Man, and something like, say, Captain America. I think that would work pretty well. But I don't know. I just don't think he brings the same. He doesn't bring enough that's unique from a DPS role. Like, again, as a pseudo support, that's fine. I guess if you didn't want to run a support, you could run Spider-Man. And like, if you didn't want to run Doctor Strange or Magik, I think you're trolling. Number one. But number two, I think that if you didn't want to run a support, I think Spider-Man is a great choice. So let's make that clear. I think he's a great choice as sort of a hybrid support DPS. But I think you really should be bringing a support when you can. Now, keep in mind that this again does determine or is determined by how the hunter does end up building and how necessary they are in the missions. If you need to bring the hunter in like 80% of missions, honestly, then the tier list changes. It really does, because then the question becomes, how useful is a character on their own? And then the whole tier list would change. I think Spider-Man would be a pretty garbage character at that point. But I'm assuming that the hunter is maybe like 50% of the time. So, I don't know. Not much to say on Spider-Man. I don't think environmental attacks are that strong as a whole gimmick when Magik exists. I think Magik automatically puts Spider-Man in situationally strong. Spider-Man is strong if you don't take Magik. If you take Magik, Spider-Man is dog water. That's my take. Cool. Next. Next and last on situationally strong. I know some people are butthurt already. Scarlet Witch. So Scarlet Witch, we already know that she'll be accessible a bit later into the game, which automatically brings her down a peg for me. I think that the fact that you're already going to have characters who you've built up, you have cards for, you've forged for, the bonds, the levels, the friendship, like you're going to have all this stuff already sort of kickstarted for your core 3 to 5 characters. I think Wanda coming in later in the game will effectively make her less useful. But that said, she's going to be really strong, so her whole thing is AoE, right? Like Spider-Man, she's sort of a pseudo support. She has CC, via Frenzy, she can make enemies attack each other. She has just a ton of damage. She has environmental attacks, and like Iron Man, she's also a ranged DPS, which is good. But the one thing I can't quite wrap my head around is her heroic card. So her ultimate is, what's it called? give in or something. Don't give in. I don't know. Where she self-destructs basically. So she kills herself um, for for just massive damage in an AoE. And like, while that's cool, if like if you did that to end a mission, wouldn't you effectively be putting Wanda in an inaccessible state? Like that just seems weird to me. It seems odd that that's the design choice. If it works how I think it works, because if you were to win with that card, which might be your only play, you effectively now can't take Wanda on your next mission, right? Like, assuming that that works how I think it works, that kind of sucks. Um, so yeah, the fact you get her later in the game hurts her tier placement for me. The fact that the self-destruct, again, I'm assuming, means that she effectively dies for the next mission if you finish your mission with that, because I know she does have an ability to revive herself as well as the once a revive thing per combat. She's just not there for me. But if you don't want to run that card, I think that's viable. I don't think you have to run the self-destruct card. Uh, you could use that heroism on other things. So if you don't run self-destruct, I think she's strong, and that's my plan, and that's why I have her in situationally strong, because I think having CC is awesome, and her AOE is awesome. So yeah, I don't know. Honestly, she might be niche now that I think about it, but it's okay. I'll leave her here for now. All right, first up in niche, Dark Hunter. So Dark Hunter, what upsets me about Dark Hunter, and the thing that worries me a little bit, is that it, it's talked about as though the Dark Hunter gets lots of damage, which is good. Single target, AOE, they've got it all. Quote, at the cost of the hunter and her allies. So, in order for the Dark Hunter, to really sort of take her own, it has diminishing returns on your team or negative effects on your team. Now, it's going to go one of two ways. Either it's going to be so strong that it doesn't matter, or the weaknesses aren't enough that they don't matter. Or the weaknesses are so strong for the reward that it doesn't matter and she sucks. Right? So I have her in niche because either the negatives are going to outweigh the positives, or the positives are going to outweigh the negatives, or it's just going to be the worst of both worlds, right? The negatives are bad and the positives aren't good enough. And that's kind of what I think is going to happen, just based off of these kinds of characters in other games. Usually, if it's at the detriment of your own team, it's not worth running, especially in a game where it's only a team of 3. Right? You got to keep that in mind. This isn't like XCOM where you're going to get bigger squads the further you go, or at least if you can. They've never said it, so I doubt it. Um, so last thing you want to be doing is putting your own team at risk. Um, and that's why I was saying with the Venom fight, right? If you can bring a ranged character for the Venom fight, do it. Do it. Because you don't want to be having one of your 3 teammates CC. So yeah, other than doing a lot of damage, I don't really know anything about the Dark Hunter, and if that's really all it does, oh, and some CC. If that's really all it is, it's not enough. That's not enough to be a good character, especially if it's at the detriment of your own team. So we'll have to see. I am interested. I will, of course, play a Dark Hunter playthrough, obviously, but we'll see. Yeah, okay. Next up, Captain Marvel. So this one, I feel like it might be a hot take. So Captain Marvel's whole gimmick is binary, right? Where she has to generate heroism. Apologize. Generate heroism, go binary, get super buff. Right? And for those who don't know, binary increases your damage by 100%, which is a huge number, right? Huge number. However, I don't know if it's going to be worth it. So yeah, you increase your damage by 100%. Now going back to what I was saying about Iron Man, I think Iron Man, or no, Doctor Strange. If the game becomes just tank and spank, Captain Marvel will be pretty broken. But I have faith that the game will not be tank and spank. At least not always. Some fights for sure. But Now, the problem with Binary is it's gone when she loses block. The problem with Captain Marvel is a lot of her cards either taunt or or diminish block or use up her block as a resource. So I find her design oddly counterintuitive. So she wants to stay binary, which means she wants to keep her block stacks, which means she doesn't want to taunt. Yet a lot of her cards have taunt, or I'm going to use up my block. So this is one of those ones where if you build the team around her, I think she could be really strong, like really strong. If there's a character, maybe Doctor Strange can do this, maybe Captain America can do this. I don't know off the top of my head. If there's a character who can give block to allies, I know characters can give like counter to allies, but actual block, which in case you don't know, it's not like a 1 block, 2 block, 3 block. It's more like it's almost like a mana bar, I believe. That's my understanding anyway. Or it's like it's larger than just 1 block, 2 block, 3 block. Like it's more like armor, I think. I might be incorrect on that. My understanding of block is it's more like armor than block, I think. So if we think about it in that way, keeping block probably isn't as hard as it sounds. But if a character can give another character block, then I think Captain Marvel goes into situationally strong. If there's a way to sort of circumvent the taunt problem, but until those two things are confirmed for me, she remains in niche. I think she'll be a powerhouse. Not really my style of character. I'm a big fan. Like I want more decisions to be made. She seems a little straightforward for my taste. But she does have CC. She's a melee attacker. She has a lot of AoE, or sorry, a lot of single target damage. I don't know why I said AoE. So yeah, I think you can make her work for sure. Or maybe like Light Hunter has ways to give block to allies. I don't know. I don't know. And last up here we have Ghost Rider. So Ghost Rider, we don't know a whole ton on yet. But from what we do know and what we've seen is he has a lot of CC, forceful knockbacks, and again, the ability to open the death pit. Again, I cannot remember for the life of me what those are called. I'm sorry. But the thing, so originally I had thought, oh, well, this is a no-brainer. You run Magik with Ghost Rider and your Hunter, done, right? I've second-guessed that notion because to me, it looks like on the surface, Ghost Rider is just an inferior Magik. Don't hate me, but that's what it feels like. Because they both open portals, or death pits, they both have forceful knockbacks, they both have AoE damage. I think Ghost Rider will do more damage, yes. But I think Magik will be more useful. That said, I think that his sort of Souls passive stuff, if there's something there where he sort of, if he's like a scaling character, right? The more kills that happen around him, the stronger he gets or something, like something in that vein, I think he could be situationally strong. And those situations will be when it's a very mob heavy mission or um, maybe there's a mission where it's sort of like a horde mode or wave based. You know how in XCOM you had to defend the UFO? There's something like that, and that's if he works how I think he works, or will work, then I think that's pretty strong. But as from what I know at the moment and from what I've seen, I do know I've seen his passive, but I don't think it works how I think it works. I don't think he's going to be all that strong compared to characters like Magik or Wanda, because Wanda will have the AoE. She also debuffs enemies as well, right? With the friends, like the CC I was talking about. But Ghost Rider, it just feels like a DPS form of Magik, but Magik has way more control. I don't know. Maybe if you like Magik's gimmick, you could run Ghost Rider in like a secondary comp in case your Magik dies, or you can run them together if you just if you really like the idea of just pushing people into these death pits, then yeah, sure. I don't know. I don't think he'll be super strong, but that's me. Alright, weaker power crept. So there's only two characters left, and I know my face is hiding them, but that is Blade and Nico. So we'll do Blade first. Blade... Blade's a fan favorite. I don't think he's going to be strong. I actually think he is... Well, I think he's the second worst character in the game. Uh, obviously, based off this metric. But the reason I think that is looking at his cards and his combat and what he does and his heroic skill and his pass and everything. It's like, okay, so what do you do as Blade? Oh, you hit people. What else? Like it it seems as though all he does is apply bleed and damage. I don't know. I don't think that's enough. That's just when every other DPS character on this list has either CC, utility, uh, or like deck manipulation, CC, tankiness. Like he doesn't have any of that from what we've seen, other than he can draw more cards for himself. He can also like his bleed is kind of worked in there. Like you apply bleed, your attacks apply bleed. Maybe there's a thing where allies apply bleed, but like unless the bleed is really, really broken, it's just not enough. And surely, there has to be enemies that cleanse, right? Like surely. So yeah, I actually think he's just garbage. I think he's power crept. Right, I didn't clarify. I think he's power crept. I think Blade is just a directly inferior character to the likes of Wolverine, Spider-Man, and even Captain Marvel. I think that all those characters will do Blade's job far better than Blade will. Now, I'm willing to be wrong. I would love the whole roster to be useful in some way, and I will find a way to make the whole roster unique in some way. Don't, like, let's be honest. But unless you get some sort of busted late game mod loadout, like so remember with mods, there's a little bit of RNG involved. So unless you get really lucky and you get some sort of god roll on Blade cards, I don't think he's gonna be worth the slot, man. I really don't. On your team, remember, team of 3. Is Blade really the guy you want on your team when all he does is damage? I don't think so. I think characters with more options and flexibility will be far stronger characters. Also, decks are only 8 cards each. So I don't know. I don't know. I think Blade is awful. Haters gonna hate, but I think it's true. I'm willing to be wrong. And last up, Nico. So like Ghost Rider, excuse me, like Ghost Rider, we know very little about Nico, admittedly. But what we do know is she's sort of a supporty-esque character. So actually, I have these in the wrong order. There we go. So Nico being a bit more of a supporty type, Blade being straight DPS, it's the only thing he does. But my issue with Nico is the fact that Wanda exists. I'll elaborate on that. So Wanda, her passive is, and this is why I didn't really touch on it much. Her passive is there is a, I believe baseline, it's 25% chance to debuff enemies around her. Okay, so even though she's a wizard, you have to position kind of closest to enemies. This is fine. This works well with her AoE attacks. Nico also has buffs and debuffs, and for the record, I love the character's design. I will be running her when I can, or at least to test her. I'll be running the whole team. What am I saying? Whole roster. But I really like the more RNG elements. But if we're being serious about like the power level, I think having the more RNG you add into your gameplay, the less consistent you will be. Therefore, Nico just sucks. Even if she can debuff enemies in meaningful ways, such as vulnerable, weaken, bleed if that counts, frenzy, I just don't think it's going to be enough, right? I really don't. I don't think her buff and debuff game plan is going to be sufficient. Now, if she can sort of be, if she has something else about her that's unique that we don't know about, maybe later in the game, maybe, maybe. But the fact that the supports in this game are, well, I guess those are limited lists because there's what, one, two, three, like two or three tanks, two or three supports, and then 5 DPS, and then your hunter. I don't know if she'll be worth it. Like, think about it, right? Would Nico be worth running with the randomness of her cards and the randomness of what she can do, and you draw a card, Heart of the Cards, Yu-Gi-Oh style, and you're like, crap, I really don't need vulnerable right now, right? Like, that's awful. Is it worth running that over Doctor Strange or Magik, where it's like, you know what you're gonna get, you have way more control, you have way more, like, I don't think so. So I think Nico is gonna be the weakest character in the game, but I think Blade is, while he's not gonna be weak, I think he's going to be power crept and incredibly one-dimensional compared to everybody else in the game. Originally, I had thought that about Wolverine, but then it occurred to me that Wolverine actually bringing good damage as a tank that can taunt, if you have CC already accounted for, is really strong. Now, it also occurred to me that if I'm right and higher difficulties take away your one resurrect per combat, which I think, like, if that does happen, then Wolverine is really strong because then you can kind of be a little more liberal with your decision making. Um, yeah. Anyway, there you go. There's my tier list. How long was that? That's almost an hour. Wow, for a game that's not even out. Isn't that something? So yeah, this is my list. This is how my power level of characters, or at least my opinion on it. And I will be playing through the game. I'll be playing playing through all the time. I plan on playing it like regularly. Now, if there's video ideas you guys have, or if you like my opinion, if you like what I had to say, let me know in the comments. If you completely disagree with me, let me know why. If you guys want me to do like a team comp video, or theory crafting video, or like a breakdown of a gameplay, let me know. Like whatever, man. I'm just chilling until December 2nd, and then it'll be hard on the content. So I'll catch you guys on the next one. Peace for now.